what's an evolutionist to do? What is an evolutionist to do? It was like in the 1970s that all these things, finally, the last vestigial organs were proved not to be true. They tried a set of muscles on the collarbone. They tried, because it was always just seemed so good for evolution. But it failed. It failed. So what's an evolutionist to do? You see, this was the argument from ignorance. Since we did not know, we were ignorant of what it did, it must not do anything. Ignorance is not information. If you just wait long enough, you'll find out what the uses are of these. We could discover more. Sir Francis Bacon, who invented the scientific method, said this: "A little science will draw you away from God, but a lot of it will pull you back again." And this is what's happened over and over again. But they don't learn the lesson. They still don't learn the lesson. Darwin said, we're going to find all the missing links and prove we came from monkeys, and the monkeys came from rats, and the rats came from lizards. Well, today, even today, everyone knows the word missing link, because they're still missing. And that has failed them too. But let's go on. We talk about new, unknown things. They'll just have to find something else we don't know enough about that we can just say, oh, it's evidence for evolution, like those junk organs used to be. So now the idea is DNA. You see, it was in the 60s and 70s we began to understand. In the 1950s, we broke the genetic code. We figured out the structure of the DNA molecule, broke the code in the 1960s, and we thought we were on top of this thing. And then we would look for genes in our chromosomes and figure out what protein they made. And if we could find a protein in the body, we could trace it back to the gene that made it or coded for its manufacture. And so we did that, and only 2% of the DNA could we figure out what it was doing. Instantly, evolutionists declared this was vestigial DNA, junk DNA, DNA we don't use anymore, that we used back in the day when we were fish and lizards. And for decades, junk DNA has been tossed, thrown, shoved down the throat of creationists and public school students. And again, it's still in the textbooks as proof of evolution. And it's just mimicking those kinds of things. Now, I now live in Oklahoma, but even before I did, I liked Will Rogers. Look what Will Rogers said. Scientists get bigger and bigger reputations the more they talk about things you can't check on. And junk DNA was something we couldn't check on until recently, and that's what this information session is all about. Marilyn Beausavant is probably the most famous Mensan in the world. I'm in Mensa. I'm a lifetime member. It's the Genius Club. You have to be in the 98th percentile of IQ to get in. Marilyn Beausavant is in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the highest IQ on record, 228. Look at what she says. Be able to defend your arguments in a rational way. Otherwise, all you have is a what? An opinion. All you have is an opinion. There's nothing wrong with having an opinion. Nothing wrong at all of having an opinion. There's also nothing wrong about having a hypothesis about what something really is like when we do not know. But when you take those hypotheses and those opinions and you throw them at people as facts that supposedly prove that your position is correct, that's when you're lying. And you're certainly not thinking in a rational way. Let's go ahead and look at a little of the history of this matter. 2007, page 54, Newsweek magazine reported this here about the problem of trying to prove evolution. It says here, they're the last creature ancestral to humans as well as chimps, our closest living cousins, lived. Standing at a fork in the family tree as momentous as it is contentious. They were talking about when did humans and apes split off from each other? When did the first chimp start evolving into a human? And look at what they said. Fossils never resolved when the lineages split. Remember, the missing links failed them. Showed it was non-evidence about evolution. So they say, look, DNA might be able to prove. So they said human DNA and chimp DNA differ by no more than 1.2%. Well, you know, that's not very surprising. That's not evidence of evolution. That's evidence of design. Of all the other living things on Earth, chimpanzees look the most like us. Arms, legs, hands, feet, although they have a thumb on their foot, and It's a little different from us. They have a hand at the end of their leg. We have fingernails instead of claws, just like the chimpanzees do. So our physical bodies and our chemical makeups are so similar that we only have 1.2% difference. That's okay. Bananas only have a 50% difference between us. And the microscopic nematode worm, which is only 1,000 cells, has a 75% similarity to our DNA. So just because the DNA is similar, that just means the body structure is similar. But look what it says. The DNA changes at a fairly regular rate. That lets scientists use this rate to calibrate a molecular clock whose tick-tocks measure how long ago a genetic change occurred. Now, that would be true only if DNA really does change at a fairly regular rate. So DNA was going to be the hero. Vestigial organs didn't prove evolution. Fossils never proved evolution or the missing link. Now they're hoping DNA would save them in the year 2007. So we're going to look at genes. Yeah, you're supposed to laugh at that part. Yeah. Now, I mentioned that I was going to do a history of this sort of thing. I first led into, by talking about vestigial organs, leading into vestigial DNA or junk DNA because they had to give up on the junk organs. The very first I mentioned came through in about 1999, year 2000. It was the X chromosome where the first hints of junk DNA actually doing something were found. You see, in female humans and many other different species, the X chromosome is where all the female genes are found. And males need this too. Color vision, for instance, is on the X chromosome. Lots of things are. Blood clotting factor. But the Y chromosome is the one that makes males males, makes them different. Girls don't have a Y chromosome ordinarily. But every male in here is proof. You can live with just one X chromosome. Thing is, females have two. Now usually if you have a double dose of any chromosome, it's bad. And now you do have a double dose of everything naturally, but if you get more than that, it causes biological problems. Down syndrome, for instance, is caused by trisomy of chromosome number 21. In other words, getting 3 of chromosome number 21 instead of 2, like normal. You can also break off a piece from 21 and attach it to chromosome 14, and it can ride in there. And so you get a syndrome of different kinds of traits. Susceptibility to respiratory illnesses, enlarged tongue, palate problems, and mild to severe IQ loss. And that's an example. But women go around, walk around with a double dose of X chromosome. And we didn't understand exactly how that works until we found out that on one of the X chromosomes, half of the genes just shut down. And on the other X chromosome, the other half of them shut down. And on any genes that actually a double dose would be good for a female, those stay open. And nobody knows why. Nobody knew why until about the year 2000. The Washington Post reported this. And look at what it says here. First, it appears that strange sequences of DNA, previously thought to be useless, are key to the inactivation process, suggesting that similar stretches in other chromosomes may similarly be involved in regulating gene activity. Strange sequences, previously thought to be useless. You know why we couldn't figure out what these sequences of DNA were doing? Because they didn't do anything that made a protein. Normally a gene leaves a protein trail. We could trace it back. But there was no paper trail. There was no protein trail. This gene doesn't make a protein. It tells all the other genes what proteins to make, when to make them, and how much. It turned out the part of this gene sequence that was doing this was in the junk region of the DNA. The 98% of our DNA that we couldn't figure out what it was doing, and we're so smart, so it must not be doing anything. It's actually coordinating all the biochemistry of the X chromosome in females. So it turns out that this was the first hint that junk sequences, junk genes, were actually Hox genes, homeobox genes, master regulatory genes that tell all the other genes what to do and when to do it. This was the first hint that they were not only not useless, they were vital. The Human Genome Project took 10 years. It was completed in the 2000s, and it discovered a lot of things. In 2001, as the project continued, scientists are amazed that the human genome is reported to have only about 35,000 genes. The previous estimates were 140,000 because we knew there were a lot of proteins in us, more than 35,000. The vastly lower number means that the human genome is much more complicated than previously thought. You see, this just makes it worse for evolutionists. Back in the day of Charles Darwin, we just thought that a cell was a bag of salty grape jelly. And oh, that could evolve in the ocean? Sure. We knew there were chromosomes in his day, but we really didn't know what they were or how complicated they were. Genes can be read forward, backward, and three-dimensionally. So you see, we used to think that the genes started out and the start codon happens, and then all these different little genetic codes say which amino acids go next, which amino acid goes next, which amino acid goes next to build a protein molecule. Protein molecules on the average are 400 to 500 amino acids long, and it takes 3 nucleotide sequences, a triplet codon on the DNA strand to just code for 1 amino acid. That's pretty complicated. But now it turns out that many of the genes not only read forward and code for a protein, but they can be transcribed backwards and make a protein. And it turns out it's even worse than that. We'll get to that later. The genes evidently perform multiple functions to direct a product of hundreds of thousands of components that comprise the human body. Your skin tone, we know, is the result of 15 different genes, at least, acting. And none of those genes just affect skin tone. It turns out the same genes affect many different things. So for evolution to make a mutation and kind of change it up a little bit in the DNA, if you change up one thing, you're going to change up a dozen other things. And what's the chance that it's going to make all of them better? Almost none. We'll see in a minute as you get here. In 2004, now the International Human Genome Sequencing Consortium has further revised that number down to only about 25,000. And this small number blows our socks off, says Nature magazine in the year 2004. We have a long way to go to understand how all the parts revealed by the genome sequence together make life. Make life. It turned out after the whole Human Genome Project was completed, it was 22,000 genes by the time the story was finished. We thought we were going to find more and more. We found less and less, which meant something else was making us the way we are, and not just the genes that weren't junk.